attention to this security camera footage. The timestamp in the upper right corner reads September 14th, 11:47 at night. The location is a remote residential home on the very edge of town where properties sit on sprawling 2-acre lots and the nearest neighbor is much too far away to hear a scream. The video is grainy, captured in stark black and white infrared, but the audio is chillingly clear. A woman suddenly runs into the frame. She is fully dressed, a purse strapped tightly across her shoulder, but she has no shoes on. Her bare feet are leaving dark smears on the concrete. She is bleeding. She slams her hands against the heavy wooden door, desperate, terrified, constantly looking over her shoulder into the pitch-black night. Her voice echoes through the camera's microphone, her breath ragged and tearing at her throat as she begs, pleading for someone to open the door, screaming for help. Just seconds later, she turns around. The camera captures her eyes widening in absolute horror. To understand how she ended up on that porch, running for her life in the dead of night, we have to look at the man she was running from, and the terrifying reality that the monster hunting her was the exact same person she had begged to save her. Elara was 30 years old, a woman who had spent the last several years cultivating a quiet, predictable, and careful life. She worked as an archivist and librarian in a mid-sized town, spending her days surrounded by the comforting silence of books and her evenings in her small, meticulously kept apartment. She was naturally reserved, polite, but distant. Before moving to this town, she had been a nurse at a busy women's health clinic in another city, a high-stress job she abruptly left behind to find peace and isolation. She had only one close person in her life, her fiercely protective and sharp-witted co-worker, Mia. Mia was everything Elara was not. Outspoken, deeply observant, cynical, and highly protective of her quiet friend. They were an inseparable pair at the library, sharing lunches and inside jokes. Because of this bond, Mia was the very first to notice when Elara's carefully constructed peace began to shatter in the dead of winter. It started innocuously enough with a phone call in January. An unknown number rang Elara's cell phone late at night. When she answered, expecting a wrong number, there was no voice, only the sound of heavy, rhythmic breathing before the line abruptly went dead. Elara blocked the number and brushed it off as a prank. But over the next few weeks, the calls multiplied, always from different burner numbers, always the same chilling silence. Then, the terror moved from the digital world to the physical one. A dark sedan with heavily tinted windows began appearing across the street from Elara's apartment building. It would sit there for hours, the engine idling, before slowly driving away. A few days later, the psychological warfare escalated. After a long shift at the library, Elara walked to her car to find a handwritten note tucked neatly under her windshield wiper. It was written in block letters on standard white paper. It read, "You don't see me, but I see you." Elara was paralyzed by fear. Her daily routine, once her greatest comfort, became a nightmare of looking over her shoulder, jumping at every shadow, and double-checking the locks on her doors 3 times before trying to sleep. She stopped going out after dark entirely. She began losing weight, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion from severe insomnia. It was Mia who finally forced Elara to take action. Seeing her best friend deteriorating, unable to string a coherent sentence together without glancing out the window, Mia insisted they go to the authorities. Elara had done exactly what experts advise victims to do. She had meticulously documented every call, recorded every sighting of the car, and preserved every note in a plastic bag, placing them all in a thick manila folder. When she walked into the local police precinct on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, clutching that folder to her chest, she was desperately looking for a lifeline. She was directed to the second floor to a small interview room, and there she found Officer Vance. Officer Vance was a 12-year veteran of the force, known specifically for handling victim support, community outreach, and nonviolent incident response. When he sat down across from Elara, he did not dismiss her fears. He did not tell her she was overreacting, a response so many stalking victims tragically face. Instead, he was warm, incredibly patient, and deeply attentive. He looked through her meticulously kept folder, turning each page with care, and praised her for doing everything right. While he admitted with an apologetic smile that burner phones, untraceable sedans, and typed notes were incredibly difficult to track without physical evidence, he promised her, looking directly into her eyes, that she would not face this alone. He immediately flagged her apartment address in the precinct system for priority nighttime patrols. And then, he did something that cemented Elara's absolute unwavering trust in him. He pulled out a pen, wrote his personal cell phone number on the back of his official business card, and slid it across the metal table. He told her to bypass the 911 dispatch entirely. If she ever felt unsafe, day or night, if she saw the car, or if she just needed someone to tell her she was going to be okay, she was to call him directly. For the next 2 months, Officer Vance became Elara's entire world. He became the singular pillar holding up her collapsing sanity. Every time a new threat emerged, he was there. When Elara received another terrifying note, this one left on her doorstep alongside a bouquet of dead white lilies, she called Vance in hysterics. He arrived within 20 minutes, bagging the evidence, sweeping her apartment, and staying with her until she stopped crying. When the dark sedan appeared in the library parking lot during a late shift, Vance was suddenly there, his patrol SUV swerving into the lot with lights flashing, chasing the mysterious vehicle away into the night before walking Elara safely to her car. He became her ultimate protector. He texted her every night to make sure she locked her doors. He called her on his lunch breaks to ensure she was feeling safe. But Mia was watching all of this unfold with a growing, gnawing sense of horror. To Mia's highly analytical mind, Vance's behavior did not look like standard police work, it looked like an obsession. Mia began questioning the timeline of events. She pointed out to Elara how Vance always managed to be right around the corner the exact moment the stalker appeared, how he seemed to arrive almost before the crime was finished. She argued that local police officers, stretched thin by city budgets, absolutely do not act as personal, round-the-clock bodyguards for a misdemeanor stalking claim. She tried to warn Elara that Vance's constant texting and hovering felt possessive, not protective. But Elara, exhausted, traumatized, and desperate for safety, fiercely defended Vance. It caused a massive rift between the two friends. Elara could not see the invisible psychological web being spun around her, cutting her off from her only real ally. The manipulation reached its terrifying peak in late August when Vance offered to do a comprehensive security sweep of Elara's apartment. He arrived off-duty, dressed in civilian clothes, walking through her home with the authoritative air of a professional. He checked the latches on her windows, the deadbolt on her door, and suggested specific hardware upgrades. What Elara did not see was that while she was in the kitchen brewing him a cup of coffee, Vance stood in her entryway and pulled a small block of molding clay from his jacket pocket. He silently took her spare apartment key from the decorative hook by the door, pressed it deep into the clay, held it for 5 seconds, and slipped both the key and the clay back before she returned. 2 days later, using the precinct's evidence lab key cutting machine after hours, he made a perfect duplicate. He now had unrestricted, silent access to her innermost sanctuary. The horrific truth was that every single terrifying incident Elara had experienced had been meticulously orchestrated by the man sworn to protect her. Officer Vance was the stalker. He was the one calling her from the cheap burner phones he kept hidden in his basement. He was the one driving the dark sedan, a rental car he paid for in cash under a fake name. He would leave a threatening note on her car while she was working, wait in the parking lot for her to find it in a blind panic, and then answer his official police phone to play the heroic savior when she called him crying. He was intentionally feeding her fear, artificially inflating her terror just so he could be the one to soothe it. He was creating a sick, manufactured dependency that completely isolated her from everyone except him. But Mia's suspicion finally hit a breaking point in September. Elara came to work trembling, looking completely broken. She confessed to Mia that she had woken up the previous night with a strange, cold feeling in her apartment. When she turned on the lights, she found that someone had been inside while she slept. Nothing was stolen, but a framed nursing degree she kept on her hallway wall had been carefully taken down and placed perfectly in the dead center of her bed. The stalker had been standing over her while she slept. Elara reached for her phone to call Vance, but Mia physically took the phone from her hand. Mia laid out a terrifying, undeniable logic. The stalker always knew Elara's schedule. He knew when she was at work, he knew exactly what time she went to sleep, he knew her security setup, and he somehow knew how to bypass her locks without leaving a single scratch on the deadbolt. The only person with that much intimate knowledge of Elara's life, the only person she had given her entire schedule and security details to, was Officer Vance. Desperate to prove she was right, to rip the blinders off her friend and save her life, Mia concocted a plan. She convinced a highly reluctant Elara to lie to Vance. Elara sent Vance a text saying she was feeling incredibly sick, that she was going straight home after her library shift to take medication, and that she would be locking herself in and sleeping until morning. But instead of going home, Elara parked her car a block away and walked to Mia's apartment. Before leaving her own place, however, Mia had helped Elara secretly place a small, motion-activated hidden camera disguised as a phone charger on the living room bookshelf, angled directly at the front door. That night, huddled around Mia's laptop on a small kitchen table, the two women drank black coffee and watched the live feed of Elara's dark, empty apartment. For hours, nothing happened. The clock ticked past 10, then 10:30. Elara was just about to angrily shut the laptop and accuse Mia of paranoia, when at exactly 11:02, the sound of a key turning smoothly in the lock echoed through the laptop speakers. The deadbolt clicked open, the front door swung wide, and a figure stepped inside, dressed in dark clothing, moving with silent, practiced confidence. The figure closed the door and turned on a small tactical flashlight. The beam swept across the room and illuminated his face. It was Officer Vance. The illusion shattered instantly. Elara gasped, clapping a hand over her mouth as tears streamed down her face. She watched in absolute paralyzing horror as the man she trusted to save her life walked through her home. He picked up a sweater she had left on the couch, burying his face in the fabric. The protector was the predator. Recognizing they had to act immediately, Mia reached for her cell phone to dial 911, explicitly telling the operator she needed state troopers, not local police, knowing Vance could intercept a local dispatch. But inside the apartment, a fatal mistake occurred. The hidden camera Mia had purchased was cheap. When the room was dark, a faint red infrared light clicked on to capture night vision. Vance, a trained police officer, noticed the faint red glow reflecting off the television screen. He stopped dead. He slowly turned his head, spotting the charger on the bookshelf. He walked right up to the lens, his face filling the frame. His eyes were dead, devoid of any of the warmth he had shown Elara. He stared directly into the camera, knowing Elara was watching. He smiled a terrifying, cold smile and reached out. The feed cut to black. He knew he had been caught. He knew Elara had lied about being home. And because he had been tracking her every movement for months, he knew exactly where Mia lived. What followed was a desperate, chaotic hunt. Anticipating that Vance was coming for them, Mia and Elara fled Mia's apartment, scrambling down the back fire escape into the alleyway just as they heard the front door of the apartment complex being kicked open. Vance was hunting them now, stripped of his badge and his facade, driven by pure rage. They split up in the dark streets to confuse him, and Elara found herself running alone toward the outskirts of town. This brings us right back to that terrifying security camera footage. The reason Elara was barefoot, the reason she was carrying her purse but had no coat, was because she had been forced to sprint into the night with absolutely no warning. Investigators later traced her grueling path. She had run for nearly 4.5 miles through dark agricultural fields, uneven, rocky ground, and dense patches of woods to avoid the main roads where Vance was patrolling in his cruiser, searching for her with his spotlight. She ran for 53 agonizing minutes. Her lungs were burning, her feet were torn to shreds by rocks and thorns, driven entirely by the primal, adrenaline-fueled need to survive. When she finally broke through the tree line and saw the porch light of that remote house, she thought she had made it. She ran up the concrete steps, leaving bloody footprints behind. She slammed her hands against the door, screaming into the camera, begging for the residents to wake up, screaming for someone to save her. But she was exhausted, and Vance had tracked her relentlessly through the dark. The moment she turned around on that porch, realizing the shadow moving toward her was him, her fight ended. He overpowered her, dragging her away from the safety of the light and into the void. When state investigators, tipped off by Mia's frantic 911 call, finally raided Officer Vance's home the following morning, they found a house of absolute horrors. His laptop contained a heavily encrypted hidden folder holding thousands of photos of Elara, taken secretly over the course of 9 months. They found her daily schedule mapped out on a whiteboard in his basement. They found the burner phones. They found the dark Nissan sedan parked in his garage. And in a stark interrogation room at the state police headquarters, sitting across from seasoned detectives, Vance finally broke his silence and revealed the chilling, heartbreaking motive behind his twisted game. It all tied back to Elara's past. 8 years prior, Vance's wife, Emma, had gone to the women's clinic where Elara worked as an intake nurse. Emma had been struggling with a deeply complex medical decision, and Elara had been the nurse who counseled her, simply doing her job by providing medical information and support. Following that clinic visit and the subsequent medical procedure, Emma suffered a severe, irreversible psychotic break. She descended into profound delusions and was eventually committed to a long-term psychiatric facility, completely losing her grip on reality and forgetting who her husband even was. Vance's grief morphed into a toxic, consuming hatred, and he blamed Elara entirely for the destruction of his family. When he accidentally crossed paths with Elara at a coffee shop in town years later, he recognized her immediately. But he decided that simply killing her wasn't enough to balance the scales. He wanted to mentally break her. He wanted her to feel the exact same profound terror, paranoia, and absolute helplessness that his wife felt as she lost her mind. And he used his badge, his authority, and the very justice system designed to protect vulnerable victims to execute his revenge. The trial was swift and highly publicized. The evidence, Mia's testimony, the hidden camera footage, the burner phones, the copied key was insurmountable. Officer Vance was sentenced to 45 years in a maximum security federal prison. He never showed an ounce of remorse during the legal proceedings. He sat stone-faced through victim impact statements. And most cruelly, he steadfastly refused to answer the one question that mattered to everyone involved. Where was Elara? Just a year into his prison sentence, Vance suffered a massive, debilitating stroke in his cell during the night. The medical emergency was severe, and while he survived, the stroke completely destroyed the language center of his brain. He suffered from profound aphasia. He permanently lost the ability to speak, to write, or to communicate in any meaningful way. He is now trapped inside his own mind, living in a complete, impenetrable silence. He holds the one piece of information that could bring closure to Elara's grieving family and to Mia, but he will never be able to share it. As for Elara, despite massive search efforts, her remains have never been found. The only piece of her left in the world is that chilling 20-second video clip. It stands as a permanent, haunting reminder of a woman who did everything exactly right. She documented her abuse, she didn't ignore the signs, she asked the right people for help, and she fought with every ounce of strength she possessed. But she was tragically betrayed by the very person standing in the light, the person who promised to keep her safe, proving that sometimes the darkest shadow of all is cast by the one holding the shield.